Good morning, afternoon, evening, everyone, and welcome back to the Genshin Impact character review series, where we take a look at each character in the game, review them, and I give my opinions on them. Today's character is Xingqiu, the best elemental support in the entire game, and everybody basically shares that opinion, and I as well think that Xingqiu is such a good character. But, that isn't a justified opinion, so why not do a deep dive into his kit and see what makes him so good. And yeah, why not begin immediately, because there's a lot of things to say about him. Starting off with his basic attacks, they're pretty normal. He doesn't have some sort of teleporting-esque move that someone like Kaeya Keqing or even the new Kazuha has. So yeah, it's pretty normal. Charge attack is basically everything the same as every other sword character. But one thing I do have to say about Xingqiu's auto attacks is that, he is portrayed as a character of elegance, and that elegance, and his attacks are nice and smooth. They have a style. So good job there, MiHoYo, on tying up gameplay and lore in a way that doesn't hurt it. But yeah, auto attacks, really nothing to note here. Then we move on to Xingqiu's skill, which is this rain slash attack. It's a double slash attack. So Xingqiu deals this double strike and then forms the swords around the active character. This skill is very good. Its multipliers are extremely good. This skill, even at low attack values on Xingqiu, and just having the skill on a high level of talent, I mean, you can easily see him deal 10 plus K, maybe even each slash, so it's really good. It does have a long cooldown, but the uptime of the swords does compensate a bit, although these swords can actually break from enemies' attacks, so it's a bit of a mixed bag. So the cooldown, yes, it's a problem. Maybe in a more passive situation, in the overworld or something, you will get the full uptime, but usually you won't. So, you can say that the uptime of the swords doesn't really matter to the skill's cooldown. So what do these swords do? These swords provide you with damage reduction, and each sword provides a certain amount. So when you have 3 or 4 of them through constellations, they stack, so they give you more damage reduction. And whenever you get attacked, so you take damage, one of the swords will break and heal the character. Another note of how damage reduction works on this skill: when you take damage, and let's say you have 3 rain swords, let's say 3 rain swords provide you with 20% damage reduction, that damage that came to you will be reduced by 20% first, and then the sword will be destroyed, and then you will have a lower amount of damage reduction. So damage reduction comes before the sword breaks, so you reduce the max amount that you can reduce. But yeah, also when enemies come in contact with these swords, they will have Hydro applied on them. So yeah, these swords are extremely good. They provide, again, really good sustainability through healing, through the damage reduction, and the skill itself is just really, really good. And then we get on to Xingqiu's ultimate, which is the absolute, not even the cherry on top. This is the freaking whole cake, the other half of the cake, as well as the cherry on top, because his ultimate, Rain Cutter, is just busted. Absolutely busted. So what does it do? So Xingqiu does his pose thingy, and then he summons the max amount of swords you can get, the maximum amount of rain swords that you can have from your skill. And then whenever a character does attacks, you see these swords fall down from above the character and onto enemies. Those swords deal a really good amount of damage. Maybe not massive, but they can really deal some great damage. And they also apply Hydro. Also, whenever your ult is active, the rain swords that are around you do not break. So you're constantly having the maximum amount of damage reduction without the swords breaking when you get attacked. Although, because the swords can't break, you cannot heal. So if you're using these swords to sort of like, heal a sort of a last amount of health, they're on like 85 to 90% of health, and you want to use the swords to heal, you must not use them with the ultimate. The ultimate, again, will provide damage reduction, but if the swords don't break, they do not heal. So be careful with that, but still, this ultimate is just so good. It lasts for so long, and you can get so many procs of the rain swords, of the damaging rain swords, that my goodness, you just apply hydro and deal damage so many times. And that's why Xingqiu is just so good. He goes so well with basically every DPS, because most DPSs, and especially Pyro DPSs, which are his best combos, they like require you to deal attacks, apply Pyro through their attacks. And with Xingqiu, you apply Hydro through the swords, and then you immediately vaporize through your Pyro DPS's attacks. And with just so many, again, appliances of Hydro through the ultimate, you're gonna vaporize every time, and you're just gonna deal maximum amount of damage. It's just so good. So good. The only thing to note about his ultimate is that these swords do not lock onto enemies. They lock onto the ground. So, for melee characters, so sort of most Pyro DPSs that use polearms, swords, and claymores, that's not really a big problem. But for someone like a catalyst or a bow user, it is a problem. Well, for bow users, most bow users right now mostly rely on charged shots, so they attack a bit too slowly to nicely utilize Xingqiu's rain swords. It's not that good. For catalysts, though, well, Klee exists, and Klee is a bit of a short-range catalyst. It doesn't have that much of attack range, so she does fit really well with Xingqiu. But other catalysts like Yanfei, she's also a bit of a more... She does attack okay-ish. Her attack speed isn't crazy, but she does attack from a very high range, so there is a possibility for the swords to miss. Xingqiu is still good with Yanfei, but again, there is that possibility of the swords missing because of that long range and because they don't necessarily lock onto enemies. Okay, so that's the only problem, but still, this ability can be used with everyone. Just everyone. You want them for perma-freeze combs, you want them from electro-charged combs, everything, you can just use this ability. And it's just so good. So yeah, what roles can Xingqiu then fulfill with this kit? Everything. Literally everything. Do you want him as a main DPS? You can actually use him as a main DPS. Again, the range sword damage is just so much, plus the skill damage that can happen every 20 seconds and such, but still, it's just so much damage. And if you get a battery for him, so another Hydro character like Mona, to just make particles for him and just have the ult always up, I mean, what can I say? He can easily become a main DPS. And if you got yourself someone like a Zhang Ling, you also become a vaporized DPS instead of sort of like a, more Hydro focused damage. So you now become an reaction focused DPS. He can be a sub DPS if you want to, so that yes, he can, you build him more as a ult DPS, so that his ultimate can deal so much damage, so he still can be considered a sub DPS there. Or he's an elemental support that just has the best Hydro application in the entire game. There aren't that many Hydro characters that can apply Hydro, but again, Xingqiu can just ult, and then you have all of your party that can use the rain card, the ult. So yeah, I mean, my goodness, he's such a good support. But yeah, as for artifacts, the max burst damage artifacts are the 2-piece Hydro set, the 2-piece Heart of Depth, so you can get 15% damage bonus, Hydro damage bonus, and then a 2-piece Noblesse to maximize your ult damage since it gives a elemental burst damage. You can go for a 4-piece Noblesse if you don't have some sort of other Noblesse carrier in the same party as Xingqiu. So you can use him to get the Noblesse buff. It's a pretty good option. I mean, yes, you lose a bit of hydro damage bonus from the Heart of Depth, but if you're gonna use Xingqiu as a support to buff your other party members, a 4-piece Noblesse isn't a bad idea. Although now, ladies and gentlemen, with Inazuma coming out, there is the new Inazuma Energy Recharge set, which its 2-piece bonus gives you like 20% energy recharge, and then its 4-piece bonus increases your elemental burst damage on a ratio of your energy recharge, up to a maximum of 75% extra elemental burst damage bonus, and that I 100% guarantee you it's gonna become the new Xingqiu artifact set, the new best in slot. Why? It gives him energy recharge, which Xingqiu does need. With the long cooldown on his skill, you can't generate that many particles, you know, and get your ultimate in like 1E, maybe 2Es if you go like full on energy recharge. So with this set, you're gonna get extra energy recharge, you're gonna generate extra particles, you're gonna get your ultimate faster, and then with the 4-piece set, those rain swords, I expect those rain swords to just go crazy on damage. Just absolutely crazy on damage. So yeah, I mean, the new Inazuma Energy Recharge set, I 100% think is gonna become his best in slot. For support and for DPS. Again, more energy recharge, faster and more ults, and then just absolutely incredible damage coming through the rain sword. So yeah. As for weapons, well then, there are plenty of weapons that Xingqiu can use. You can basically use every single weapon. So let's go, you know, through the list of weapons and see what fits. Black Cliff Longsword gives crit damage, so if you're using him as a sort of like sub DPS, not necessarily an elemental support, but sort of sub DPS or even main DPS, you can balance your crit damage and crit rate through the Black Cliff Longsword, and it gives attack. So yeah, pretty good weapon. Favonius Sword, really good weapon. Gives energy recharge, so that is mostly for elemental support, Xingqiu, or even sub DPS Xingqiu, because you do need the energy recharge. You do need as much energy as you can get, because again, he does have problems generating particles because of the long skill cooldown. So it's gonna be a bit hard to get the ultimate up without some sort of energy recharge. So perhaps if you're using something like the Black Cliff Longsword, so a weapon that doesn't have energy recharge as its stat, you might want to get an energy recharge sand, let's say. Iron Sting, okay, base attack, gives elemental mastery, so it's not the worst. You know, elemental mastery helps on Vaporize, so maybe even for a elemental support Xingqiu, that's gonna deal a lot of damage through Vaporize, or well, mainly Vaporize really, because Hydro doesn't have both Melt and Vaporize like Pyro does. So if you get yourself something again like a Zhanling, and you're using Xingqiu to Vaporize through the swords, then Iron Sting can be very useful. Its effect is also really nice. Lion's Roar, not for Xingqiu exactly. It has good base attack, gives attack percent as a bonus. But the thing is that you're not increasing damage against opponents affected by Hydro. You're increasing damage against opponents affected by Pyro or Electro. So maybe a Vaporize or Electro-charged comp can work with Lion's Roar on Xingqiu. So it is a possibility. Prototype Rancor, it does give physical damage bonus, but its effect is really good. So, and it has good base attack. So Prototype Rancor, not for a support Xingqiu, mostly for sub DPS, main DPS, you know, because the physical damage bonus will help when, you know, you have your downtime on your E or your ultimate and you're just dealing sword slashes, so that physical damage bonus will help. And then we come to the Sacrificial Sword, Xingqiu's best in slot weapon for basically every role if you want. So not the best base attack, 41, but gives a lot of energy recharge, and its effect is of course the elemental skill reset. And this is what Xingqiu needs exactly. If you are to reset the cooldown on Xingqiu Z, you can easily just reactivate this skill if you need more particles or want to deal more damage with the again, or if the swords break before their duration ends, so if you take damage, you're gonna just immediately reactivate the skill and boom, you have your swords back, like they never went away. So yeah, like Sacrificial Sword is definitely considered Xingqiu's best in slot weapon. He is that one character that Sacrificial Sword really helps, because there aren't that many other sword characters that have long cooldowns on their skills, and Xingqiu is the only one, and Sacrificial Sword is just perfect for him. Just perfect. The double E, whenever you need it, for whatever reason you're gonna need that second skill, is exactly what Xingqiu wants. Next up then is the Ally Flash. Best base attack, gives a bit of elemental mastery, and then its effect is pretty nice. So this weapon can sort of hit a sub DPS or elemental support Xingqiu that does deal some good amount of hydro damage through the ult and a bit of extra vaporized damage through the elemental mastery. But you need to be careful, of course, to not take damage and lose the effect, because that's what Ally Flash does. So a sub DPS that doesn't really appear that much on the field. The Black Sword is a good weapon, again, for mostly a main DPS, sub DPS Xingqiu, because this weapon is normal and charge attack focused, so you're gonna want to have Xingqiu out on the field dealing some damage through his normal attacks, because this doesn't help with... It helps with balancing crit rate and crit damage, but it doesn't help with increasing your rain cutter damage. That's the main problem of it. The Flute actually fits Xingqiu very nicely, both in its, effect, it's really nice, and, like, it's very stylish. It does fit Xingqiu very, very much. But yeah, the Flute, good base attack, has attack substat, that's pretty fine. Its effect doesn't necessarily increase your burst damage, or your damage at all, but if you get it at, like, Refinement 2 and plus, you're gonna be dealing, like, a crit in an AoE, so the Flute can be useful. And with how Xingqiu attacks a bit slower than most sword users, he's actually gonna be able to get each stack every hit, so the Flute is a good idea. Festering Desire, not a bad choice for Xingqiu, if you have Festering Desire, that is. Good base attack, gives energy recharge, and then increases your elemental skill damage and crit rate. So you're gonna be increasing that skill damage even more and helping it crit. And trust me, at a high level with some good attack on Xingqiu, that skill can just destroy enemies. It literally can destroy enemies, especially if it vaporizes. So Festering Desire is a good option if you don't have some other character, or again, if you don't have Sacrificial Sword. Sacrificial Sword is just his best weapon. That just cannot change. As for 5 stars then, Aquila Favonia, not really meant for Xingqiu, maybe a full-on main DPS Xingqiu, because Aquila Favonia has the best base attack, 48, so you're gonna be increasing your attack a lot, so your skill and burst will be dealing a really good amount of damage. The physical damage bonus is a nice extra when, again, you don't have your ult up, or even if you have your ult up, you're still gonna be hitting enemies and you're gonna be dealing physical damage, so that can help with dealing even more damage. And then its effect, it has a passive 20% attack increase, so you're still getting some more attack from Aquila Favonia, so it can easily, nicely fit Xingqiu. Although, there is also the Skyward Blade. It has a good base attack and it gives energy recharge, so it does help you, again, have your ult up more, while Aquila Favonia doesn't. So you're gonna need a battery if you're using Aquila Favonia as Xingqiu's main weapon. For Skyward Blade though, you don't necessarily need that because of its energy recharge, and its effect is pretty nice. So you gain just a tiny amount of crit rate, and then whenever you use your burst, you increase your movement speed, you increase your attack speed, and then your normal and charge attacks deal extra damage. So while your rain cutter is dealing some good damage, your auto attacks are also dealing some nice amount of damage. So Skyward Blade easily fits nicely into Xingqiu. For elemental support, not that much, because again, the second E from the reset of the Sacrificial Sword is just too good to pass up. And if you go and experiment with Xingqiu, you really see how much he needs that Sacrificial Sword. But still, Skyward Blade is a very good option. Primordial Jade Cutter, well, if you want it for a sub DPS or main DPS Xingqiu, then of course Jade Cutter is just absolutely busted because of its crit rate, where it just gives you free 50% crit rate, just for getting it to level 90, and then its effect is really nice. It gives some extra attack based on your HP, so both Xingqiu skill and burst will be dealing more damage. The Freedom Sworn, it isn't the worst weapon, I must say. It is definitely for a support or sub DPS Xingqiu. Again, doesn't give energy recharge, so you're gonna need some sort of battery, or not rely completely on Xingqiu's burst, because it gives elemental mastery, good base attack. Elemental mastery, it gives a good amount of elemental mastery, so it will help with Xingqiu vaporizing, and its effect is a bit weird. So the thing is that for the effect of the weapon to work, you do need Xingqiu to trigger a reaction, not your main DPS. So you're gonna need to be a bit careful with how you use Freedom Sworn, but still, good option if you don't have Sacrificial Sword, really, to be honest. I don't think it's better than Sacrificial Sword on a support or even sub DPS Xingqiu, but it's still a good option. But then, and this is something that I actually just realized last night before recording this voiceover, there is the new upcoming 5-star sword, which is the Mist Splitter's Edge, or I think that's what it's called. And this weapon, ladies and gentlemen, I seriously believe can actually completely shake up the meta. Why, you may ask me that? It's because this weapon makes one of the things that the Genshin community absolutely hates, which is C6 Bennett. So if you don't know what C6 Bennett does, Bennett has Bennett's burst is a field where if characters are standing in it, they get healed and then they get an attack boost after a certain amount of HP. So yeah, C6 Bennett, what Bennett's 6th constellation does is that if characters that are using swords, polearms, and claymores are standing inside this field, their weapon is infused with pyro, and they gain a bit of a pyro damage bonus. The problem, why people do not like this constellation is that if you are to infuse a non-pyro character with pyro, you're actually gonna be losing damage on your attacks. The reason being because, again, that character isn't a pyro character, so most likely you haven't given that character a pyro damage goblet. And if you go and say, well, what if I give them a pyro damage goblet? Well, then your hits will be dealing some good damage through Bennett's C6, but your other skills won't be dealing as much. So you unfortunately went to a bit of a win-lose situation where you had to sacrifice some of your damage one way or another. And it just really didn't, and it only fitted the absolute full pyro DPSs like Hu Tao and Diluc. But now, with Mist Splitter's Edge, this changes. What does Mist Splitter's Edge do? Well, it has really good base attack, 48, and it gives crit damage as its substat. That's nice. Its effect, though, it passively gives you 12 elemental damage to all elements, and then you can gain stacks through different ways. You can gain 1 stack if your normal attack deals elemental damage. You can gain a stack for casting your elemental burst, and then you gain a stack if your energy is below 100%. So without having your burst. So you can cast your burst and you immediately gain 2 stacks. So, and the amount of elemental damage it gives on 3 stacks on refinement 1 is 40%. 40%. Do you know how much a elemental goblet gives? 46.6. So you can give this weapon to Xingqiu and have a C6 Bennett as a support. And what happens is you put down Bennett's burst, you infuse Xingqiu with Pyro. Xingqiu uses his burst, so now he has 2 stacks of Mistsplitter's Edge, and then he just needs to attack one enemy and deal elemental damage through his normal attacks because he's infused with Pyro, and he gains 3 stacks. So now he has 40% elemental damage bonus, so 40% every element, including Pyro, so he has 40% Pyro damage bonus, plus the 10 to 15% you can get from Bennett's C6, that's 55% Pyro damage bonus. That's more than what a goblet gives you. And with when Xingqiu's ultimate active, Xingqiu can vaporize both ways. He's either gonna vaporize through the Pyro hits from Bennett's C6, or he's gonna vaporize through his ult. And if he vaporizes through his ult, not only do you most likely have a hydro damage goblet on him, so he's gonna have 46 hydro damage and then another 40 through Mistsplitter's Edge, so he's gonna deal immense vaporized damage through his burst vaporizing, or you're gonna deal a very good amount of vaporized pyro damage through your hits. So it's a win-win situation. And not only that, you can even give Xingqiu a 4-piece Crimson Witch set so that he has even more pyro damage bonus. So you close the gap between your hydro damage bonus and your pyro damage bonus even more. And then for the 4-piece set of the Crimson Witch set gives you extra vaporized damage. And again, you can vaporize both ways. So it's an absolute win-win situation. So yeah, I think that Mistsplitter's Edge, if you get it through the gacha, literally can make the best Xingqiu main DPS. Not only Xingqiu, Kaeya as well, because you can also use it with Kaeya. Again, you're gonna get 40% pyro damage bonus through the weapons effect. You're gonna get 15% through Bennett's C6, and then with Kaeya, whichever way you melt, either through, let's say, his ultimate or through the pyro hits, you're again gonna be dealing a good amount of damage. So it's again a win-win situation. So yeah, that is it for weapons for Xingqiu. And again, this Mistsplitter's Edge that just bombarded my head when I was going to sleep. I was like, I seriously couldn't sleep because I realized how this could shape the meta. Because again, people just completely hate Bennett's C6 because it just doesn't go with many characters. But now, even if you don't have Xingqiu, you 100% have Kaeya. So if you just get this weapon, you can make Kaeya an extremely good melt main DPS. And it's just crazy, isn't it? So yeah, that is it. You know, as a conclusion, Xingqiu is an incredible character that can just do so many things, and is just the best freaking Hydro support to ever exist, maybe. So yeah, that is it for me. Next up is gonna be Chongyun, actually. And yeah, and after Chongyun, actually, we're gonna be delving into 5-star territory, ladies and gentlemen. And yeah, so I'll see you then. Bye bye.